and there's just like one line from the whole like book, only one line has been quoted, and that one line confuses you about the Prophet ﷺ. It confuses you about what he said. He makes you think the Prophet ﷺ would never say that. He'd never do that. An example of this would be, for instance, like the Prophet ﷺ, he said, when you walk down the road and you see Jews and Christians, he said, push them to one side. So, how would the Prophet ﷺ, he's rahmatul lil alameen, he's mercy to mankind. And in Sahih Muslim, this narration is there, that if you see the Jews and Christians, push them to one side. So the commentators say that this statement was actually said in the situation of hostility. There was extreme hostility towards Muslims in the early part of Medina from the Jews, right? So this is the Muslims, there's like cases where like people, an incident took place where a Muslim woman came to buy something, and one of the Jews, what he done was he took the peg of the tent and he placed it like behind her dress, like people do when they take their laces, someone's laces unknowingly, and tie them together to make them trip. So he's placed this peg inside of her dress. She's walked away and she's become mute. And in front of everyone, she's been embarrassed. And these are the kind of like things that they try to do against Muslims. And it's been documented in Hadith, the Banu Qurayza incident and the Banu Qaynuqa incident and others. So the Prophet ﷺ, instead of telling the Sahaba, look, don't be afraid of walking down the street. Be confident, walk down. And if they push you to one side, you push them to one side. Don't be afraid. So this is why we have to understand like lots of background to Hadith, and the preserved Sunnah in the lives of the Sahaba. It makes more sense to take that because that was actually something which was practiced and it was accepted by the wider community. Okay, so those who are permitted to narrate now, had to have high reliability, right? They had to be really reliable. And number two is they had to have understood the context of every narration. This was in the early generation. It was like, do you know what you're narrating? Do you really understand what you're narrating? Okay, this brings us to the next issue, which is when narrations were being narrated, narrations were either narrated word for word or they were narrated in meaning. Now, you'd be surprised. Majority of the narrations that we have in existence are not the exact words of the Prophet ﷺ. They are basically the words of the Prophet ﷺ or the meanings from the Prophet ﷺ in the words of the narrators. So